In this section, we're going to take a look at an interesting piece of history that reveals a vital role that Carl Jung, the founder of analytical psychology, played in the development of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was an interaction that he had with Bill Wilson, the founder of AA, that laid the groundwork for the spiritual aspect of the 12-step program and recovery from addiction.
You know, you hear the term spiritual experience a lot around 12-step recovery. Little historical perspective on this for you guys. There's a story in the big book about a guy before AA started who was a hopeless alcoholic. He was seen by all the top doctors in the world. He went over to Europe and he got in to see Carl Jung, who was one of the most famous psychologists in the world. And he got in to see him, and Jung started treating him. And Jung finally said to him after a while, he said, "You know what? There's nothing I can do for you. You're hopeless." And there's a line there that said, "Our friend felt like the gates of hell had clanged shut on him." He said, "Doc, is there nothing I can do?" He said, "If I were you, I'd get around some religious folk. I've seen some people of your nature recover, but they've had a vital spiritual experience, this whole rearrangement, a psychic rearrangement." He said, "That's what I've been trying to produce with you, but I'm not having any luck. All I can say is maybe try religion." And so what ended up happening was this guy, his name was Roland Hazard. He was a friend, he went back to the United States, he was a friend of a guy named Ebby Thatcher, and they got sober together in a religious organization called the Oxford Group. And the Oxford Group had these little steps that they worked. They were sort of religious principles, and they got sober. And Ebby Thatcher was a friend of Bill Wilson's, and Ebby Thatcher went and met Bill Wilson one day, and he was sober, and Bill's like, "Whoa, how'd you do it?" He said, "I got religion." And Bill says, "Oh, geez, here we go. I'm not going to be interested in what he has to say." But then Ebby said to him a line that's pretty famous, and I would suggest that none of us would be sitting here today if he had not said this to Bill Wilson. When Bill was he said, "Not real interested in the God thing," Ebby said, "Why don't you choose your own conception of God?" And you could say, the rest is history. And so in 1961, Bill Wilson wrote Carl Jung a letter, and he said, "I just want to acknowledge, I want you to know the significant impact you've had on Alcoholics Anonymous. You might not realize it." And told him about, Roland Hazard and Ebby. And Carl Jung wrote him right back, and you've got a copy of the letter that in your handout there. And he said, "I'm so glad to hear that. I often wondered what happened to that guy." He said, "There was so much I wanted to tell him, but as it says there, how can we formulate such an insight in a language that's not understood in our days?" Carl Jung wanted to tell him some things, but he didn't think Roland would be able to understand it and think he was crazy. So I write in there, it was Carl, this is an example of knowing when to keep his mouth shut. He said, "But you, Bill Wilson, I think you're a little bit more enlightened, and I think you can handle what I'm going to tell you." He said, "What I wanted to say to him is I see alcoholism is what it says here. His craving for alcohol was the equivalent on a low level of the spiritual thirst of our being for wholeness, expressed in a medieval language, the union with God." But he couldn't say that to Roland. He didn't think Roland would be able to handle that. And he went on to tell Bill, he said that the word alcohol in Latin is spiritus, which ironically, the word spiritus also translates to something meaning the highest religious experience. One word, two different meanings. And actually the word alcohol comes from an Arabic word, al-kul, which means body-eating spirit. And our word ghoul in the English language comes from al-kul. It deadens the senses is what they recognized back then. And so what Jung was saying is that the proper formula is actually spiritus contra spiritum, meaning the spirit against the ravages of spirit. that the solution to this most depraved poison is the spiritual experience.